triumph and glory. The arch soars above the Roman citizenry, drawing their vision towards the greatness of Rome, the honor of war, and the eternal power of the godlike emperor. All hearts beat as one, slave, servant, citizen, nobleman, for the victory, for the triumph, for the glory of Rome. Political propaganda at its best. An arch shape raised and decorated to create the ultimate display of the power of Rome. The Triumphal Arches changed history in three ways. First, the arches proved the emperor's glory. Second, they emphasized the imperial virtues. And third, they inspired later civilizations to use architecture as a means of indoctrination. For the first time in history, the arch was not used for the standard purpose of supporting a structure or acting as a gate. Instead, the arch was utilized as a way to sway the masses. A normal object in architecture was filled with meaning and emotion, evoking passion for Roman victory.
A triumphal arch is a monumental architectural statement of victory. The Romans liked nothing better than to defeat an enemy, and the victorious general who had defeated the enemy would parade through the streets of the city of Rome with his captured, with the loot, with the enslaved leaders, if they were still alive, of the conquered people. In going through these arches, they not only commemorated their own victories, but they also sort of were brought into the whole history of victory that were represented by these other monuments. There are three main ones. The first is the Arch of Titus. It was built after his death. It was completed by his younger brother Domitian, and it celebrates the victory of the Romans over the Jews in the great rebellion, the great Jewish rebellion that ended in the year 69-70 with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The next arch that you find in the Forum is the Arch of Septimius Severus, who was an emperor from North Africa who came to power in Rome in the early part of the 2nd century AD. It's a much more elaborate structure. It has many sculptural friezes that depict victory of his victories in battle over various barbarian enemies. The next and the last arch that's surviving in the city of Rome is the Arch of Constantine, which was put up by the Senate in order to celebrate the new emperor Constantine, who seized power in the West in the year 312, when he defeated a rival emperor named Maxentius, who lived in the city of Rome.
When a Roman citizen saw the arch monument, they felt not only pride, but immediately understood the qualities that the emperor possessed. The triumphal arches impacted the Roman society by acting as a kind of propaganda that convinced the ordinary citizens that the emperor had the necessary skills to rule over them. And these skills, also known as the imperial virtues, were presented in the raised reliefs on the triumphal arch.
Smart emperors took a great deal of care demonstrating to their people that they possessed these virtues. What were they? Well, first of all, the emperor had to demonstrate that he was loyal to the gods, that he was dutiful, that he performed the necessary sacrifices, and took care of all the rituals that would guarantee divine favor for the empire and all of the people who lived in it. The emperor was the intermediary, in a sense, between the population of the empire and the heavenly establishment. So that kind of religious piety was of first importance. Next, the emperor had to present himself as a victor, as a martial leader who conquered all of Rome's enemies. Now, sometimes, of course, the emperors were not particularly military, and they were not particularly victorious in fact, but in principle and in propaganda, they were always represented as conquering, triumphing, victorious military leaders. At the same time, the emperors had the responsibility of taking care of the infrastructure of the empire, of making it a better place for their subjects.
The Triumphal Arches not only impacted Roman society, but also other civilizations. Napoleon understood the powerful message the Triumphal Arch provided, and built his own l'Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France, to commemorate his victories in 1806. The architecture of these triumphal arches were modeled after the Roman designs, and all memorialize the successes of an expanding nation.
In later periods, particularly in the 19th century, 20th century, when people in Europe began to establish vast empires of their own, mostly colonial empires, in order to commemorate and celebrate their the great extent of their power, the many lands that they ruled, the authority that they could command, they built celebratory arches themselves. We find triumphal arches in Rome, we find them in New York City, we find them in Paris, we find them in Berlin, we find them, I think, in London. We find them in many imperial capitals of the modern world. And I think this indicates the lasting significance or the lasting influence of the Romans and their architecture on our collective imagination of what it is a nation and an empire should be like. People constantly refer to Rome. They find what they like in the Romans as being worthy of emulation.
The innovation of using the architectural shape of the arch as a method to convey concept and emotion, power and glory, was uniquely Roman in origin. The raised reliefs on the sides of the arches displayed parades of booty, the emperor looming over the conquered peoples. The emperor, godlike in victory, godlike in power. The impact of the triumphal arches as propaganda was so successful and complete in convincing the Roman citizenry of their emperor and military leaders' successes, increasing their political strength, that future civilizations adopted the use of this same decorated architectural arch to display propaganda.
It seems interesting to me that while the arches and the other monuments of victory could blind Romans or blind us, more importantly, to the savagery of that imperial system, the Romans themselves were very upfront about what their empire entailed. I think that one of the ways that these arches had an impact on Roman society was by creating a kind of public memory of victory, a kind of public presence of repeated victory. And even though people were not well educated, even though they didn't know the details of the reign of an emperor who'd lived a century or so before, they could share in the pride that those monuments represented. And it gave them a sense of continuity, it gave them a sense of collective endeavor, it gave them a sense of belonging to an imperial community that they might not have had if those monuments hadn't been there to remind them and to embody their own sense of identity. The arch, in and of itself, is just an architectural feature that holds up weight above it. It doesn't have any meaning. It's just a functional structural element. What makes it particularly significant in the Roman context is that it was filled with meaning, the meaning of victory, the meaning of empire, the meaning of triumph, when it was used in this public, celebratory way.
The Triumphal Arches, an innovation that gave emotion to the arch and filled it with the role of convincing citizens that victory was possible for the empire. This innovation impacted Roman society and future civilizations, and changed the use of a regular architectural piece into a device of propaganda.